Council, I ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. See none. Moving on to the approval of council minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on July 20th. Moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to the minutes of the closed council meeting held on July 23rd. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? And that's carried. Is there any business arising out of the minutes? See none. Then we'll move on to reports of staff and delegations, and we'll start with the East Marsh break wall. Luann.
Thank you, Mayor and members of Council. The recommendation tonight is just to receive my report for information. This staff report is being provided to Council as an update on the progress of the revised assessment schedule for the East Marsh Breakwall, as previously approved by Council under Section 76 of the Drainage Act. The following attachments provided in the report gave the history, a 2017 report, minutes of a council meeting held on 2017 where there was landowners present and voiced their concerns, and then another report in 2018 which appointed Root Engineering to prepare the report. In 1973, a drainage report was created to install a municipal breakwall under the Drainage Act. An assessment schedule was created to assess all the lands affected by the breakwall. At the time of Council reviewing the above noted staff reports, there were several concerns that the assessments to the interior farmlands was unfair or unbalanced. As noted in 2017, repairs were completed under an existing bylaw at a total cost of $87,000. The lakefront homes that received the armor stones paid approximately $130 each, and the agricultural lands and the road authority paid the remaining of the cost. The report in 2018 that was presented to Council, where Council appointed Root Engineering to review the assessment schedule. And then Council may also recall in 2018, which the report is attached, that the recommendation was that no more work be completed on the breakwall until this new assessment schedule was approved and adopted by Council. Currently, there are 57 residential lots along the breakwall, and since the presentation in 2018, 3 requests have been received to repair the breakwall in front of the residential lots. One at 266 East Beach Road, one at 230 East Beach, and one at 254. Since the engineer was appointed, there has been more significant storm events. The owner of 266 East Beach Road would like his breakwall repaired as soon as possible. Gerard Root of Root Engineering has advised that the report will be presented to Council in early fall of 2019. Once this report is adopted, repairs to the breakwall can then move forward. As far as financial impact, the cost of the engineer's report will be assessed as proportioned in the new adopted report. At that time, Council and all the landowners affected will receive a copy of that report and then also invited to Council to speak to that report. Any costs for future maintenance or repairs to the breakwall will be completed under the drainage maintenance budget and then assessed to all benefiting landowners, as noted in this new report. I would like to point out what's taking the report so long. Breakwalls are not a typical municipal drainage infrastructure. Breakwalls are different in that Gerard and I have been having a tough time to find similar precedent-setting type of assessments for these for this type of drainage works, as we call it. I will let Gerard explain what he's going through in order to get the report completed.
So what we're doing is making investigations to help determine a fair and equitable way of assessing for costs of repairs to this breakwall when the maintenance works need to be done. We made a review of the site with former drainage coordinator Sid Vanderveen from the OMAFRA. He's provided some suggestions and ideas for how to possibly allocate assessments for the works that may be completed so that it provides a more fair and balanced way of assessing the costs out to the people that are being protected by the works that are in place there currently and need the repairs done to them. The scenario there is that we still have to come up with a solution, and what I'm doing is considering these different ways of establishing what benefits what properties, and then trying to figure out a way of allocating the costs in a manner that will allow for ready calculations to be done, as well as resulting in an assessment schedule that will balance assessment to the properties that receive the most benefits and reduce assessments to those that are more secondary and not as directly affected by the proposed works of repairing the break wall. Sid Vanderveen did point out that there are no regular reports that he's ever seen during his 20 years or so at OMAFRA directly similar to what we have to deal with here on this break wall maintenance and repair works. So that has posed a bit of a challenge for us as far as how to address it. So we'll look at using typical Drainage Act procedures for cost assessments, such as possible cutoff benefits, direct benefits, and basically no outlets, because outlet assessment typically deals with flows that are from properties where the wall is a structure that's unique in that it's just protection and benefit to the lands by protecting their value or enhancing their value. So that's what we'll be working to try and establish a method of fairly assessing what the benefits are to the properties when works are done to improve and repair the assessment break or the break wall there along the beach that was installed under a drainage report.
So further to that, we have some obstacles as far as break walls are not something we normally maintain. So for us to determine urgency or with a typical drain, there's sediment in the drain. We know how much sediment is in the drain. We know how much needs to be removed. We can tender and look at the works in that fashion. With these break walls, what does a hole mean versus a whole rock missing? The picture that you're seeing right now was taken from our drone video that we flew over back in May or June. I'm not sure which date exactly. But this isn't a stretch where it's vacant lots. There is no houses within this area, so it's between Mercia Road 1 and Mercia Road B. I was surprised to see this, that there basically is no break wall. But in the same aspect, no one is complaining about it. So that's where I am going to have that hard time of weighing, once this report is completed, what takes priority and what doesn't. So that's what we have for you tonight, and we just wanted to provide you with that update.
Thanks, Luann. Council, do you have questions for either Mr. Rood or Ms. Maritet? I'm going to start with Councillor Hammond.
Mayor, thank you. Luann or Gerard, when those emergency repairs were done in 2017, and looking at the report to the tune of $87,000, how many landowners were assessed with the remaining balance? I see that the lakefront properties were assessed $130 each, so that left a balance of around $75,000 or $80,000. How many landowners were a part of that sharing of costs?
It was the entire East Marsh drainage scheme. So anyone from Mercia Road 1 to Mercia Road 19 to Mercia Road C, and then all the lakefront properties as well. I'm not sure exactly. I want to say there's approximately 1,100 acres within this scheme.
Okay, thank you. And if I may go further, I just wonder what the current cost per hectare is now. I don't know, Gerard, if you have that information readily available or not. I know we're looking at a new scheme, but...
We haven't obtained any kind of cost figures or anything yet. There were emergency repairs carried out on one of the sites there last year at a $40,000 cost, and the assessment to the directly affected property was approximately a couple $100 or so, and then thousands of dollars were picked up by agricultural lands that were already protected by the dike and the roadway that exists between the lake and those low-lying lands, and that's where the proportion and the equitable sharing of costs seem to be out of whack with respect to doing maintenance on the wall. The break wall was installed originally with significant grants available from the federal government and the provincial government. Although there's been some research done to see if there's anything available at this time, there's no indication that there's funding there yet, although I know that municipal staff are working to try and source funding through contacts with government representatives and such as well. So what we're going to do is to try and figure out what a cost per meter might be for repairs, and then establish benefits based on length of properties perhaps, or just the level of protection that they receive, depending on their location relative to the break wall position.
Yep.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gerard, you already answered one of my questions about the funding. The other one is, when would you expect to have the report ready? Do you expect that some of these repairs might be able to be made this fall yet before the November gales?
We'll try and have the report in hopefully in September sometime, and then it'll just be a matter of going through the process of the Drainage Act procedure with consideration in Court of Revision meetings. We're hoping to have had enough input from owners on their concerns and issues so that we can strike a balance as to who's receiving most benefit and how we should probably allocate assessment costs and try to incorporate that into the updated assessment schedule that we'll be doing under the drainage report. And we'll try and address any concerns or questions that come in beforehand. Owners will be alerted to the fact that when they get the report, they're welcome to contact the town drainage department or our office to discuss any questions or clarifications they may want to have on the report. And we'll try to have those addressed or answered prior to council meetings so that when we get to the meeting, hopefully everything's already been looked at, or we have recommendations to make as far as addressing it and allowing for the report to proceed without any significant delays.
No one else? So this tonight, Luann, was just to tell us about the timeline for the impending report with the assessment, et cetera?
Yes, because we've had a few more requests for repairs, but as we noted in that previous report, that staff are not doing any repairs until this report is completed.
Okay, and that's so that the assessments can be
Updated.
updated?
Yes.
Okay, because we do have a number of people that want to speak to council tonight, so I wanted to make that clear that no decisions will be made tonight. It's just about giving us an update on where we stand. But with that, I'll ask Tom Dick to come forward. I have you down as a delegation, Tom. I was told Phil was going last.
Phil's presentation is separate from East Marsh.
Okay.
So
So Tom, you're next. I'm going to lay out some rules, Tom. 5 minutes, Tom. No, and we need your name and address. And you know that it's respectful here. We're here to listen to you, and we don't mind, but it's just a matter of, it is a fairly lengthy agenda, so that's why.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Tom Dick, 1110 Mercy Road 1. All I want to talk about is just the Drainage Act at the time when Mr. Whalen give the money to in 1973. And basically, my brother used to work for him 30 years ago, and they had chats about that thing. It was a unique situation. He said it was the quickest way in order to get financing quickly at that time for what was going on down there. And I look at along, when you go south, you go along Point Pelee Drive, Bill Dunn, I believe you live down there. Everybody pays for their own break wall, right? So, and this was a situation where they needed money quickly. That's what happened. So that's basically what I got to say.
Wow,
How's that?
I'm speechless, but thank you. Thanks, Tom, appreciate your input. For sure. Next, I have John Landshut. Lots of familiar faces here. John takes me back 12 years.
5 minutes.
Oh, yes, sorry, 5 minutes.
John Landshut, 2035 Road B. My concern is if we continue to piecemeal a cottage or two or three at a time, and we take the assessment, regardless of if it gets altered a lot, with all of the homeowners versus us owning the land inside, agricultural land, it's going to burden us over the next 10 or 15 years, because we have, as we can see, we have 2 or 3 homeowners who want their property done in the next few months perhaps, but there's 57 different properties here. So if we multiply that 57 times $40,000, whatever the cost may be, over the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to be an astronomical amount for us interior landowners to absorb as part of our agricultural land. So as we have said before, we need to not lose focus of this. This needs to be one project from Wheatley Harbor to the point, to the south point of a Point Pelee. And I believe if we work with the National Park and the feds and everything else as well, that if we put together a larger project versus 1 or 2 homeowners each year, perhaps each season getting done, we will have a much bigger opportunity to get funding for that entire East Coast line. That's my comment.
Okay, thanks very much,
Thank you.
John. Ken Ham. No offense, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and councilors and staff. It kind of feels like a Bill Murray moment of going over the same thing every time we sit here and talk about drainage and flood protection. And so I know you're all logical people. I understand even the newest of the councilors has some logic. And when we talk about drainage and flood protection in the same breath, it sometimes really gets me rattled, because when we talk about this as a drainage issue, we're clearly, you all understand, it's not a drainage issue. Drainage is getting rid of water, and flood protection and break wall protection is trying to keep the water out. And I understand how we got here, but I'm really pleading with this council and staff to figure out a way how we get out of this rut, to, put your magic hats on and find a way that we don't go through this every time we have this issue arise. Because, as you know, $130 to protect let's say a $500,000 home really doesn't justify, an interior landowner the whole farm is worth maybe close to that or partially that, paying the lion's share of it. It's so wrong. It's logically wrong. And so I know it's not your fault how we got here, but I'm pleading with you to figure out a way how we get out of this mess. Because otherwise we're going to be back here. I have a feeling we're going to be back here again this fall, addressing this issue with all of you again. And we just were here in 2017 and we didn't get satisfaction out of that round because, I paid a really good chunk of money for those 2 homes the last time, and I'm not happy about it. And if it were the other way around, if the homeowners were asked to pay more to drain my lands, that wouldn't go over very well either. So let's just be fair and sensible and logical. Drainage is drainage, flood protection and break wall is just that. Let's just keep our logical thinking going. That's all I got.
Can you give us your address? Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to take the wind out of your sails.
Ken Ham, 1608 Road 2. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Duly noted. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Mr. Heil, last but not least. Is that okay, Luann, Mr. Heil, to speak now? Sure, come on up. Again, we'll need your name, your address, and 5 minutes.
Sure thing. Am I on yet?
Yes, you're on. Oh, now you're,
Yeah,
there you are.
Okay. Phil Heil, 266 East Beach Road. Mayor McDonald, Council, I'm here on a separate topic, although it is kind of related. The reason I'm here today is just as a spokesperson for some of the concerned residents of East Beach Road of a specific property, which is 442 East Beach that you see on the screens above you. It's denoted by the red arrow. If you go to the next slide. This property is owned by Mike and Deborah Savino. It's the northernmost home on East Beach Road up near the Old North Beach. And the reason I'm here today is they're in a dire situation where their home is on the verge of being lost due to all the issues we've been talking about with the break walls and the northeast wind over the past few years. Next slide. This is just satellite scans from the geomapping that's available on the Leamington website. And this is the first year of scans of the year 2000. Just showing the house and the break wall that's in front of their house. Now these guys at this end aren't part of the municipal drainage scheme. They're responsible for their own break wall. And you can see there's an armor stone break wall in front of their house. And I want you to note that there's a small fox block barrier on the north side of her house that kind of protects her from sand entering her yard. Next slide, please. I'm going to skim through the next 2 or 3 slides up to 2015. I believe it's slide 9, just for the sake of time. Right there. 2015, now we can see how much that's undercutting into the beach area, now exposing her property more to the northeast winds. Next slide is 2017, the last year the scan is available currently. You can see at this point, just even from the sand there, that a bunch of the vegetation on the property north of her is now gone. She's extended her barrier wall on the north side to try and protect her home. And thankfully, due to technology, we were able to get a drone photo of the property recently. If you go to the next slide, oh sorry, skip that one, right there. This is 3 weeks ago, so it's a pretty dramatic picture of what's happening here. And you can also see she spent more money again extending the fox block wall, basically the whole length of her property, trying to protect it from the incoming lake. And again, the lake levels have varied up and down over this whole period of time. It's basically, we're at the mercy of the east wind. That's the major contributor, among other things. And again, this is a couple that are both of Canadian heritage. They plan on retiring to this home. And in this situation, the value of their home is very much at risk to being worthless. If you can go to the next slide. This is a picture looking back at their house from there. You can see just from the storm wind event this past April, the fox blocks are already failing. And as we all are very well aware, the western gales that we get here in November from the northeast, we're pretty certain most of us that live there know that that wall will not be there if we do get a significant event. And likely a good chunk of her house, if not some catastrophic damage to her property. So as a taxpayer to the town of Leamington, and somebody that's going to retire at their home, they're at the risk of losing all the value of their home. And if you go to the next slide, and the problem with that is that now makes the person next to them, their property value is affected, and so on down the line. So we're trying to find out a way to quickly protect this home, at least for the interim. And again, it kind of ties to what Luann presented her report, although it's separate. The red circled area, we're considering if we could get armor stone to connect her existing break wall, which she has maintained over the years and put a lot of money into, and make that all armor stone. That would at least protect her in the interim for the next few years until a long-term solution is found. Again, she's put tens of thousands of dollars into the barrier wall and the break walls over the years, and she's at a loss right now of what to do. And again, this house is on the verge of being gone if we get a significant enough storm. The unfortunate thing is there is a property owner for the property north of her, and they will not allow her access to her property or use her property for any protection. So we're kind of looking to the mayor and the council for any expertise or resources that we could use to potentially make that happen, where they could at least get some protection for that property in that area. We have heard through the grapevine that the property owner may be willing to sell. Maybe it's a possibility that either ERC or the municipality could purchase that property for a nominal value, and then we could use that property as a place for protection for this host. So again, we just wanted to make that aware of that problem, and if they're looking to the council for any resources or expertise they can provide to help protect this person's home, especially in the oncoming fall season.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. So you want the municipality to put in some kind of break wall? And would we be allowed, if she's not being allowed to protect it by the neighbor next door, or well, the owner next door, because I remember this from years ago, this problem, Why would we be allowed to do that? Do we
That's
have?
what I'm asking. Again, none of us as homeowners know what the answer is, and we're asking maybe there's some expertise among the council or that from a legal perspective. Is there anything we can do? And if not, is there maybe some alternatives? We're just at a spot where there's nothing else we can do. She's out of space, out of money, out of time, and she's going to lose her house at the end of the day.
Luann, can you answer that for us?
I can't answer specifically what the municipality can or cannot do, but I do know what's happening down in Cottery. It's a similar situation. Landowners have a vacant lot, they cannot build on it, so they're in a catch-22. They're not going to protect their property because they cannot build on it. So all we can do is tell that homeowner to try and protect their property as much as they can. We cannot enter their property, we cannot do any repairs. It's just they have to figure out a way on their own to maintain their property.
And we have no right to go on that neighbor's property if that
No,
neighbor does not allow
I think
it anyway.
Rob might be able to clarify the repairs that we did in Cottery within our right-of-way because we weren't allowed to enter onto private property either.
Can I make one more quick point? Or are we speaking? Sorry.
Well, let's just get an
Yeah,
answer
sure.
to that. Ruth, do you mind?
No, that's fine. And there is, the case law indicates that there's no legal obligation on the property to the north to shore up their own property or to provide any protection for abutting lands. There are no bylaws, and I would question as to whether we have any authority to pass such bylaws to require that to be done. Certainly from a policy perspective, you would be putting a very heavy financial burden on a property owner to protect another person's property. We do have one bylaw which really was in place, I believe, to deal with properties uptown that have zero lot line, which provides the authority for a property owner to do a repair or maintenance to a wall by accessing another neighbor's property. That is not necessarily applicable here unless we did some tweaking to that bylaw to include structures such as shoreline protection. Currently, it talks about buildings or other structures, and under the code, shoreline protection wouldn't fall within that bylaw.
Thank you, Ruth. And you're asking for the municipality to take care of it. That is what your request is, Phil?
Not necessarily to take care of it, but we're looking for ideas. I mean, there's a bunch of people in the community that know this couple very well, and it's just a heartbreaking situation, and there's no easy answer to it. So we just thought maybe there's some expertise within the municipality that there may be ways around it legally or whatever, some mechanism to help. And I just want to make the point that the Savinos, the property owners, did meet with the municipality and IRCA in 2011, 9 years ago, and there was discussions at that point of providing potentially some relief from permit costs, and the town was potentially going to provide some materials, broken concrete, et cetera, root balls to potentially build that up, and nothing happened, as far as I'm aware. So here we are 9 years later, we're in a much worse position than we were then, and she's still fighting for a piece of property she's going to lose.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Are there questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Phil. Is there anything else from council or Luann, anything from you in addition? So then it is recommended that the report be received for information at this point in time. Moved by Councillor Thiessen, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. What's the next one? Then, Luann, we're moving on to the East Beach Road, the new petition drain.
Thank you again, Mayor. What we're asking council to recommend tonight is that that council receives a petition dated July 4th from the Municipality Road Authority relating to the entirety of East Beach Road pursuant to Section 4 of the Drainage Act. Administration will notify the petitioners, landowners, the Conservation Authority of its intention to proceed with the creation of a new drainage works along East Beach Road. After the April 28th storm event, several landowners attended the municipal office asking administration to clean, raise, and replace existing catch basins along the east side of East Beach Road. Staff advised the landowners that it was in fact a roadside drainage system and not a municipal drain. The municipality has received a signed petition from the road authority asking that the engineer review this entire roadway for drainage. Part of this report explains the process under a petition, and then we go into actually what we're looking for a petition. What I'm asking of council is for a preliminary report. The entire East Beach Road has a series of catch basins and pipe crossings from Mercia Road 1 all the way down to Mercia Road C, but there is no specific plan. There was a drainage problem. The road department at the time probably installed a catch basin and a pipe crossing the road. Currently, you now see what's happening between the lakeshore properties and the road. There's kind of like a belly going on in there. So you see a lot of residents with hoses running from their basement crawl spaces, hoses running from their backyard and outletting to a catch basin down the road or in front of their house. These landowners have been requesting that the existing systems be improved or replaced, and under our roadside budget policy, it doesn't really clearly identify who pays for it. We have the idea of a farmer asking to use a roadside ditch is easy. That farmer wants that roadside ditch cleaned out. We tell him, okay, you're paying 2/3 the cost, and we can move forward. In this case, it's like the catch basin is 3 houses away. Who actually do I get to pay that 2/3 cost? So again, this is one of those roadside drains that is being used for more than just the road. Residents are using it, so this is the opportunity to convert it to a municipal drain and make the landowners pay their fair share for the assessment of the repairs. So what we're asking council tonight is to appoint Root Engineering to prepare a preliminary report on the East Beach roadside drainage.
Thanks, Luann. So council questions, comments? Motion. Moved by Councillor Thiessen, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to now the Marintet Marsh Drainage Scheme Breakwall and the Dike Emergency Maintenance Works. And an update with that as well.
I just want to clarify why Gerard is still sitting beside me. He's been helpful in several of these reports, so I'm keeping him here just in case anyone has any technical questions for him. So this report, again, is just an update on what's been happening out in the Marintet Marsh between Marintet Beach and Marintet Drainage Scheme. There has been a lot of work completed and a lot of work to do still. So we just wanted to provide council with an update on this as well. So bylaw 4137 was a bylaw confirming an engineer's report prepared by Bill Setterington in 1984. By way of this bylaw, a breakwall was installed along the easterly shoreline of Leamington to protect the interior dikes of the Marintet drainage scheme. Under the same report by Setterington, improvements were also made to the existing dikes shown in figures 1, 2, and 3. The breakwall is now in disrepair as of April of this year. It completely has blown out in 2 major locations, as you can see in those 2 photos. This is the most southerly tip of that breakwall. So what you have on the east side is the breakwall, and then you have in the middle, which was a small cut that on occasion I would go and open during high water levels within the canal. And then on your left-hand side is the Marintet dike itself. So further to the review of the most recent bylaw, 19 parcels of land and 7 associated property owners will be assessed for all this maintenance work. Attachments 1 and 2 of this report illustrate the Marintet drainage scheme and the location of the breakwall in relation to private property lines respectively. Attachment 2 depicts the level of natural erosion that has taken place since establishing the residential lots. As administration has been working diligently on several maintenance works already and currently arranging for additional maintenance works. The purpose of this report is to provide council with an update and what is also proposed. So number one, we're working on the Marintet breakwall itself. This is at the entrance to the Marintet Beach. This work was completed in June at a cost of $19,000. With that, the Marintet Beach residents are paying for it, along with the Marintet drainage scheme. We'll be sharing that cost. Next would be the Marintet breakwall. There are the two large breaches within that breakwall. Emergency works to restore portions of the armor stone was tendered and has been awarded to Cobby Marine with emergency approval from the CAO at an estimated cost of $536,000. Construction is to start within the next few days. The Marintet breakwall maintenance behind the armor stone. So once we, if you can flip back to the other pictures. One more, like the pictures, the photographs. Okay, so these are the two major breaches that we're going to be working on. As you can see, the rocks are basically gone. Our job is, the first project that Cobby was tendered will be repairing the breakwall itself. All of the large 3 to 5 ton rocks will be reinstated, but then from that we need to come back and create the laneway, the backside of the breakwall. So that'll be phase 2 of that project. Further to survey work and review of the Marintet earthen dikes in consideration of the high water levels, maintenance and repair works to raise the dikes to the design elevation will be required as well, which means additional clay will be hauled in, placed, graded, and seeded. Estimate at this time is unknown until the full scope of the work will be determined. Further to the survey work and review of the entire length of the Marintet breakwall and in consideration of the high water levels, maintenance and repair works to raise the breakwall to the design elevation will be required. Additional armor stone placement is likely required, estimate unknown at this time as well. Brushing of the north and south dikes. If you look across to where the green is in the back of the photographs, we're looking at removing all of those trees. Those trees are currently underwater and they're making the dikes unstable at this point. So we're going to remove them all. We're estimating that work to be about $80,000. We have 3 known locations of seepage going on through the dikes. There are 3 areas identified, 2 on the east-west dike and 1 on the north-south dike. And we're looking at approximately $90,000 for repair on those. The Marintet pump station itself, we're having a major issue with the flap gate. We're trying to get repairs done on it. However, it takes experienced divers to come in. I met with them today, and it appears we can start the work September 1st on that. Complaints from the Marintet Beach landowners are complaining about the engine noise. My response back to them is, although they're dealing with a lot of water, so are the farmers, so the farmers are constantly pumping. The problem with the pumping is the flap gate is not sealing properly either, but at the same time we will be having a person come in to look at if anything can be done regarding the noise of the pump itself. Complaints of the inability of the existing system to drain the entire tiling network is currently being reviewed by administration and Dillon Consulting as well. Administration notes that this is not a long-term solution, a sustainable resolution for the flooding issues in southeast Leamington. These works are simply to try and protect the area in the short term. These projects were not included in the 2019 drainage budget, but administration is deeming them to be urgent given the high lake levels and damage to infrastructure during the storm events. All costs of these works on the Marintet breakwall and the Marintet dikes will be assessed to the benefiting property owners according to the latest drain bylaw. This is a municipal road, there is a municipal road share of only 2%. For the $550,000 in emergency works completed or in the process under this report as described, the net cost to the municipality will be approximately $11,000. Landowners have requested that the costs of the works be debentured.
The works are going to be costly, but are considered to be a work of maintenance under the Drainage Act, and as such, landowners are typically given 30 days to pay once the invoice is received. Administration will be recommending adherence to the existing billing practices for the subject maintenance works.
Thank you, Luann. So if I may, when we undertake these projects, are we going to keep a running total as we go, keeping in mind a limit? How are we going to handle this? Because again, being paid for by the landowners, it just sounds to me like we're already racking up quite a price here. Is there, Rob, if you don't mind, I'm trying to voice what I am guessing the landowners would ask. If I was a property owner down there, I would want to know, are you going to have an up limit? Will there be an opportunity if the cost becomes so high? Will there be an opportunity for us to have a discussion on debenturing? If you can give me those kinds of answers at this point, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Your Worship. The landowners have been part of this process, so they've been kept apprised as to what we're doing, and in fact, they've been asking for it. When you look at the pictures of that particular situation there, that is the most dire situation we face along our shoreline. A significant storm event with some surge could see the overtopping of that dike. The overtopping of that dike would likely mean in those conditions complete inundation of that entire drainage scheme. Is very expensive infrastructure. It won't be a sort of open-ended project. We defined a scope. We're going to fix the break wall in those two particular locations, recognizing that this, what we're going to call a very minor repair in relation to the size and scope of the overall infrastructure. It's very minor, but it's over $500,000 to do that. Excuse me. But if we don't do that, that dike will fail in the very near future. What's essentially happening is that shoreline that you see there is getting deeper. So rocks just don't disappear. What happens is the shoreline erodes further, and those rocks essentially fall into that deepened shoreline. So this will be a continuous process of trying to keep this up. We are looking at, there's other improvements in this area that we're looking at, but every initiative that we undertake, there will be a process of engaging the benefiting landowners so that they understand the cost, and a process of keeping council updated as to what we're doing and why. Right now, excuse me, we're not looking to do any improvements to the infrastructure. We're just trying to keep it up to the design criteria, and in many circumstances, as noted in this particular report, we're not even getting it back up to design criteria because design criteria puts us seven figures, a few $1 million on this particular break wall alone. So it is certainly part of the overall shoreline Southeast Leamington discussion, that we have to continuously have with regards to the sustainability of the area.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. And this is all going back to the landowners. Okay. Council, let's start with Councillor Dunn.
Madam Mayor, I have to agree. I know it's a dire situation, but the debenturing, especially when we talk $500,000, but there's also, you quote 90,000 for this, 80,000 for that. There's a few other different things that are going on that's probably also going to be rolled into that cost. And so then it starts taking it up further and further, right? And we don't want to put anybody, we're all in a tire straight here. So the debenturing of it is really something that I would seriously consider. When we talk about this, and putting all that infrastructure in, is there going to be fabric put in amongst the rocks I don't know if that would meet IRCA's criteria, but to help retain or catch any of the sand or in the wave action? It may not even do anything, but you will know a lot better, but I try to use that on my property and to help to save a little bit here and there, and just a thought.
Yes, the original design had filter fabric and then smaller stones at the backside. So that's where I'm saying my phase one is going in with a large rock. Phase two will come back on. So phase one is actually being done by a barge. Phase two will come in with the barge, bring in the smaller rock and fill in the gaps on the backside with filter fabric and the smaller rocks, and then rebuild our road that is there as well for a maintenance corridor.
Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Luann, has Point Pelee been approached? Are they willing to do some protection along there? In Figure 4, you can see a little peninsula there that seems to protect the very southeast corner of that breakwall or of the dike. And to me, that would save a lot of money on the inside, potentially, especially in a southwest wind situation.
That will be another report that'll be coming to you. What we're looking at is that little treat area that you see, that was taken from a drone video in May or June again. But that treat area is actually our property. So what we're looking at is potentially hiring an engineer under the Drainage Act and running, so you see how the north-south breakwall comes southerly, potentially designing another one that runs parallel with it, but on the inside of the breakwall.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Mr. Newfield?
It's odd that I would ask a question of Luann, but I think it warrants some explanation. Under number 4, we talk about maintenance and repair works to begin on the dikes to design elevation. And it's my understanding that that design elevation is of the previous, the current design elevation, which was based on lake levels that we knew at the time when it was built. In other words, these are not design elevations for today's lake levels. This is just getting us back to what the original design was at the time. I just want that confirmation.
Yes, correct. We are not doing any redesign, any review by an engineer. It's just bringing it back to that 1984 report.
So I think that's important for council and everybody to understand. These are incredibly difficult and at times scary situations, and can be, as Rob said, very expensive. But to ask, we can't have a discussion about how expensive it's going to be to do something without talking about what the impact might be of not doing something. And this is one of those situations where that dike is at risk. As Mr. Sharon said, a storm coming in the right way is going to cause some real difficulties. So I wanted the people here to also know that administration and council to know that administration is taking this very seriously and trying to do what we can under the current framework that we have, keeping in mind the great cost of both doing something and doing nothing. Just my comments.
Well, I don't usually like to engage with the CAO at this table, but then, and I'm going to go back to what Mr. Heil said. So if we don't do anything at the end of the barrier beach or Hillman, whatever we call that, is there a chance then of our infrastructure also being compromised? And if we don't do something, the risk of not doing something is greater than what you just said? If you don't mind me bringing that up, I feel like we didn't really answer him. I wanted Mr. Heil to see the kinds of costs we're talking about, the costs that we have to put back to the property owners, so that if we start paying for one property owner, then all the property owners are going to want the municipality to pay. So do you understand what I'm trying to say? But then further to that, I would say Mr. Heil would ask you, well, what about the Hillman there? Is our infrastructure at a point of being damaged that will then compromise the rest of that section of road? If you don't mind answering that.
Well, those are considerations, and why there are studies being done by people like Peter Zuzik in cooperation with Chatham-Kent as well as Leamington, because now what you're getting into is a discussion around the sustainability of the entire situation. I can't answer that question here tonight. We do know that there have been places where the municipality's infrastructure was at risk after the land has been, after the private lands have been affected, and we weren't able to do any works until such time as we could protect only our infrastructure. I know that almost doesn't really answer the question, but maybe that's the point. It's hard to answer that question right now. Those studies are being done, and they're not being done just in Leamington. They're being done in Chatham-Kent. They're being done everywhere along the shoreline in Essex and Kent County. Peter Zuzik, who's an expert in these areas, has helped guiding all of us in how and what to consider as we go forward. I think that's the best I can answer that tonight.
Yeah, no, that was good. I just needed that, answered for the end of the comment there that you made. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, and this is a hypothetical question, you know, for that situation that Rob described, that there is potential for, you know, an ultimate worst case scenario to happen there where the Marintet is, as he said, annihilated. At that point, what responsibility does the upper levels of government, let's say province or the feds, what role would they play at that point? That would become a disaster at that point. Do we have any sort of indication, you know, if this November, if a terrible situation like that were to happen, what would be our best guess scenario? What would happen there?
Through your worship, I think all of council and Councilor Wilkinson, you can appreciate difficult question to answer because we are talking about hypothetical situations. We do know through previous flood modeling exercises that if that Marintet dike fails, the entire scheme will become inundated, and depending on the lake level at the time, other schemes could be inundated as well. So it was modeled at an elevation, lake elevation of 176 meters, currently Mercy Road 19, which would be the boundary of this particular scheme. Various parts of it sit at 175 and a half meters. So if we were to experience that 176 meter elevation, we would likely see it spilling out into other schemes as well, or it could be potentially contained within that particular Marintet drainage scheme. There's a number of different conditions. Within the Marintet, my understanding is, Luann, there are no residential units in this scheme. It is all agricultural land, so that's a positive, because certainly with a dike breach, you know, comes the need to evacuate those who may be flooded. So we don't have that issue. With regards to responsibility, you know, generally sort of after the fact, these are private lands. We shouldn't have a discussion about what to do now and what to do in the future without understanding, you know, the history of the area. And there are other people, you know, certainly more educated than I on the history of this scheme. My understanding is approximately 70 years ago, this was reclaimed land, and dikes were built, the water was held back, and it was turned into privately held agricultural land for private benefit. Frankly, I don't know if there is any obligation, you know, to those private landowners, you know, from an upper level of government or the local government to, at that time, you know, come in for cleanup efforts. Those discussions would have to happen at that time. That's the best answer I have for you now, Councillor.
Mr. Neufeld.
I'll come at it from a little bit different angle. The upper levels of government are aware of this issue. They're aware, especially the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. We have had discussions with them. We have had tours of the area with their representatives, and the mayor and the deputy mayor and I will be meeting with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs as next Tuesday, a week from today, in Ottawa. I don't want to say that there's going to be an answer that comes out of that meeting, but if your question is, are they aware? They're aware, and we've made sure they're aware, and we've been advocating for them to become engaged in some discussion. And I think those discussions are starting to happen, especially as Chatham-Kent and Essex County, all the municipalities around Essex County have been getting together for discussions, and we can see some movement in there being a coordinated effort, I think is what someone was alluding to tonight. I think that there is a coordinated effort to try and discuss what are the options, But if you're asking, are they aware, they're very aware. I don't know what their legal obligations are. I think that will be up to them and their lawyers to determine that.
Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. Luann, I'd just like to go back a bit if we can. The affected landowners have asked for this to be debentured, and we know it's going to be in the millions, this work. Will we have an opportunity to deal with debenturing at some later point? Did you indicate that earlier?
In my report, I stated that the landowners are requesting council to allow them to debenture.
So that decision is something then that,
I've got Mr. Sharon that would like to address that if you don't mind waiting.
Sure, Your Worship, if I may, that request has been made. Certainly, that decision does not have to be made right now. We will do the works, we'll finalize the cost of those works. If that is still a request of the landowners at that time, we will bring it forward to council, because as noted in the report, we will not recommend that we start debenturing maintenance works. The municipality should be very careful about becoming a lending institution for these works and recognizing the amount of debt that frankly the municipality could be saddled with if parts of these areas, if subsequent to this work, because this by no means is this a permanent fix and a flood protection fix for this area. It's just trying to hold this thing together. And if the lands become worthless and inundated, the municipality could be on the hook for a lot of debentured costs on lands that really have no value any longer, depending on the state of the emergency. So, we wouldn't be recommending that council consider debenturing the maintenance works, but that will be a matter for council to determine.
Thank you. Further questions? No? Okay. Moved. The recommendation is that council receive the report, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Luann. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But we still have the Burt Pulley Drain, the south side extension, and the new petition drain on that.
Thank you again. The municipality was advised that a tile drain on the south side of Mercia Road 7 was slow draining or backing up and contributing to flooding into Mercia Road 7 drain, and adjacent properties. The drainage superintendent attended the site and confirmed that in addition to road drainage, there was at least 2 private connections made to the roadside tile drain. An effort was made to locate the entire length of this drain and all of the drain outlets, but the results were unsuccessful. Administration then forwarded a letter to all the landowners who potentially use the drain for stormwater. That was a temporary road Then we installed a temporary road crossing to mitigate the urgent drainage concerns, but that the road authority would petition to make this tile drain a municipal drain. The subject lots were severed over time and are all currently assessed into the Derbyshire drain, which the Derbyshire drain is at the back of all of these lots towards Mercia Road 6. Now that there is a temporary road crossing installed to relieve the flooding, those properties being drained should be assessed their fair share into the Burt Pulley Drain, south side extension. At this point, we don't have a name for it. We're just asking council to appoint the engineer, so there is no actual name to this drain. Administration has received the petition signed by the road authority, and we're asking council to go with a full report rather than a preliminary report. This one seems to be pretty straightforward as far as watershed boundaries and converting the existing tile drain into a municipal drain without any cause for a preliminary report. We just go forward with the final report. Typically, a modern severance process includes for a proof of drainage condition to address how stormwater will be managed on a severed parcel. Historically, many connections were made to roadside tile drains without this process. A roadside drain is only for the purpose of draining road water. If landowners are draining to a roadside ditch, it should be converted to a municipal drain for future maintenance and cost sharing. So once this report is created, it will be forwarded to council for consideration. Administration also notes that once this report receives council's approval, the existing Burt Pulley drain and the Derbyshire drain will need to be amended to reflect the changes in the watersheds and the assessments for the new report. This project is not included in the 2019 budget. However, the overspending will be mitigated within the drainage department budget. The cost for the work will be divvied between the municipal road and assessed landowners as per the new engineer's report. The completed report will be presented to council for consideration and include an assessment schedule.
Okay, thank you, Luann. Are there any comments or questions from council? I would entertain a motion. Moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you both. We are now moving on to the Seacliff Drive East and the Cherry Lane traffic study, and I believe that is Mr. Toffelmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. So the recommendation before you this evening is that Council receive and approve the Seacliff Drive East at Cherry Lane Traffic Impact Study prepared by R.C. Spencer Associates, and that based on the results of the study, the recommended design plan alternative 1 be approved for final engineering. On September 9, 2013, Council adopted the Seacliff Drive East Widening and Roadway Improvements Schedule B Class Environmental Assessment prepared by Stantec Consulting as the basis for future design and consideration, or design and construction of the Seacliff Drive East corridor from approximately Cherry Lane to County Road 33. The problem identification presented in the EA is that the section of Seacliff Drive East from Cherry Lane to the East Side Arterial Road requires widening as well as upgrades and improvements due to the existing condition of the road and poor drainage, projected increases in overall traffic volumes, changes in the pattern of traffic flow to the east of the urban center, anticipated major residential commercial development in the northeast and southeast areas designated in the municipality's official plan. Construction of the East Side Arterial Road, which intersects with Seacliff Drive East. Seacliff Drive East is classified as an arterial road in the official plan of the municipality. Existing conditions will not support current and future development. Spencer's assignment included for a review of the 2012 EA. 7 years has passed, and it is good practice to review conditions for significant changes to municipal plans and legislation. The Highway Traffic Act, associated Ontario traffic manuals were amended in 2016. Leamington approved their active transportation plan in 2016. In July of 2017, R.C. Spencer Associates completed the Leamington PXO crossing and PXO active transportation design assignment. Much work of the described in that report is complete. All of the former courtesy crossings have now either switched to the new PXO style as prescribed in the traffic manuals or eliminated, such as the one at Highbury-Canco. Also, with their 2017 report, Spencer recommended that the municipality prepare to upgrade the Seacliff Drive and Cherry Lane intersection to a full traffic signal within a 5-year period. In the interim, it was recommended that an always stop should be considered. The 2018 reconstruction of Erie Street South provided cause for support for the interim measure of an always stop. On May 14, 2019, Council awarded the Seacliff Drive East Cherry Lane to Regatta Engineering Services assignment to R.C. Spencer Associates. The assignment generally approved the redesign of Seacliff Drive between Cherry Lane and Regatta Drive, including a traffic signal at the Seacliff Drive and Cherry Lane intersection. R.C. Spencer has conducted updated traffic counts, analyzed the data, and completed the traffic impact study. A summary of recommendations and conclusions of the study are as follows. A widening of Seacliff Drive East from a 3-lane cross-section west of Cherry Lane to a 4-lane cross-section through right turn lane and an exclusive left turning lane in each direction at Cherry Lane and Danforth Avenue. Recommended design plan alternative number 1. Refer to figure 1. And figure 2 represents the preliminary design included in the approved EA. The cross-section should return to 3 lanes east of Danforth Avenue to Regatta Drive and beyond. Signalization of the intersection of Seacliff Drive East at Cherry Lane. Relocation and rerouting of the existing driveway at the Curling Club opposite Cherry Lane. Separate left and right turning lanes for 4T intersections approaches to Seacliff Drive East, namely Cherry Lane, Danforth Avenue, Iroquois Road, and Regatta Drive. A multi-use active transportation pathway on the north side of Seacliff Drive East between the Leamington Trail and Cherry Lane, with a transition via the proposed traffic signal at Cherry Lane to the south side of Seacliff Drive East between Cherry Lane and County Road 33. Active transportation facility design and construction practices are changing. As an example of a change as reflected in the recommended design, there is a movement away from on-road bike lanes towards protected lanes or trails within the right-of-way, but separate from the roadway. This particular intersection is not a straightforward design given the proximity of the offset intersection at Danforth, the driveway entrances of adjacent properties, and the active transportation infrastructure. The recommended alternative addresses these challenges in a pragmatic, cost-effective, and sufficient manner. A status quo consideration of either no traffic control on Seacliff Drive at Cherry Lane or leaving the four-way stop in place should not be considered. These alternatives fail to provide an appropriate level of service under today's conditions, and this traffic demand will only increase with additional development and the resulting increase in traffic. This intersection improvement is the first phase of a multi-phase initiative to improve Seacliff Drive East from Cherry Lane to the East Side Arterial Road as described in the 2012 EA. The Seacliff Drive East at Cherry Lane traffic impact study prepared by R.C. Spencer Associates is attached under a separate cover. There's no financial impact at this time as the study and design works are already accounted for as part of Spencer's assignment. Budgetary considerations are as follows. The construction of the traffic signal and road improvements at Cherry Lane and Seacliff Drive intersection is planned for 2020. Reconstruction of Seacliff Drive East between Cherry Lane and Regatta is planned for 2021. Complete with sidewalks, lighting, storm drainage to the Selkirk Drain, approximately $2.8 million total currently budgeted for both projects. On April 23, 2019, Council approved an application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Stream, for an additional $2.9 million for the reconstruction of Seacliff Drive East from Cherry Lane to Bevel Line. Should that application be approved, the road reconstruction currently planned to end at Regatta in 2021 will be extended to Bevel Line with completion estimated in 2022. R.C. Spencer Associates is here with us this evening with a presentation, and I now turn the mic over to Mr. Toffmeyer.
Well, thank you, Mayor McDonald, members of council. I do have a brief presentation to summarize our report process as well as our conclusions. As Alex has indicated, the formal process began with the environmental assessment, and the plan that is there on the board shows basically the fundamental design that came out of that. I do want to make a couple of comments about it. Essentially, can we go back? Sorry. A couple of comments about the basic plan. As you can see, it starts on the westerly side as a 3-lane cross section, and then approaching Cherry Lane and through Danforth becomes a 4-lane cross section, exclusive left turning lanes eastbound to turn onto Danforth, and westbound to turn onto Cherry Lane. I want to make a note on, I know that my friends are here from the Curling Club and they are concerned about the issue of their driveway access, so I thought I would just take the opportunity to make a couple of comments related to that. As you can see, the driveway is retained on this plan. However, there's a big circle drawn around the two intersections which says possible future traffic signals. That means that that plan that you're looking at there, that is the result of the, is not a signal design. It is a roadway design that retains the access. So what we have done, this exercise has been to transform this section of road and consider the signal design because, very simply put, it warrants the signals, and we learned that from our work on the PXO. So the signals are warranted now. The always stop was put in because it's justified as the warrant is justified on the basis that you can't do everything at once. So the signal will follow, but the always stop is there because of the warrant for traffic signals. I'll also add that the warrant for traffic signals is broader, takes in more considerations such as pedestrians and active transportation crossing needs and timings and such, not just the level of service of vehicles. So then moving forward in the background, the active transportation master plan considered bicycle lanes on this stretch of Seacliff Drive connecting to the Leamington Trail. Bike lanes to the east and a multi-use trail on the north side to the west. Now, as Alex has indicated, things have changed in that area of active transportation, and preference is not for on-road bicycle lanes, and I think we've had that discussion amongst us previously. We've taken that into account in our design and have recommended a multi-use pathway as indicated on the recommended plan, and I'll speak to that when we get there. The 2018 PXO review, I've already referred to that. That was the basis on which the always stop was implemented as an interim measure prior to signalization. So we undertook a bit of a design exercise to look at possible alternatives in case there was something that should be looked at beyond what the EA concluded. So we did look at a direct roadway connection between Cherry Lane, and we looked at two traffic circle alternatives, one a more or less standard design, and one which came out as a kind of a peanut shape. And I'll show you those plans. I don't want you to fall off your chairs. But the direct roadway connection looks like this. There's a very major piece of utility with the Hydro One station there that is kind of untouchable. And so in order to properly connect them, you would need to go in through the private lands and the parking lot. We can go to the next traffic circle alternative, which I don't want my colleagues from the curling club to fall off their chairs either. This one would move the whole intersection more or less to the north. And then the last one tried to combine access from Danforth and Cherry Lane. So needless to say, if we go to the next slide at the bottom point, we decided to review the preferred plan from the EA, which is the signalization option, in detail to see if and hope, I guess, that we would be able to make that work adequately and not have to go back to the other more elaborate alternative design options. So that was the process that we used. And the results of the analysis, fortunately, show that it will operate very effectively with a standard traffic signal and a two-phase operation as we have designed it. Now, this does not retain the driveway into the curling club. There are two main issues with that. The first of is a private property, and so you run into issues when you have to signalize it with respect to, for example, detection systems that need to be put in place, and they end up on private property, and you get up with that. Secondly, the constraints of it, it is offset, so it would be a non-standard geometric design. And thirdly, the operation requires a phasing that accommodates traffic there, so that creates operational issues which delay other approaches in the intersection. So all of those things then are disbenefits, and you end up spending money for poles and mast arms and signal heads, which are there to support a non-standard and non-optimal operation. Bottom line also, there are 2 points of access into the property, and that access will service the land use fully adequately and appropriately. And so the signalized design that we have prepared relies on the access to the Curling Club property to be the driveway to the west. The most difficult problem is the proximity of Cherry Lane and Danforth, and the limited amount of space between them for the westbound traffic to queue. We do not want queuing that extends and block Danforth. That's the big issue. And what we found was that when we design it the way we have provided with the crosswalk on the west, we have enough space to avoid that problem. That's the good news, and that's the reason why the design works very efficiently. If we can switch now to the recommended plan, yes. Thank you. That's the earlier version, and it has been superseded by this one. We can still use it. I'll have to ad-lib this. You can see that there's a crosswalk on the westerly side and a crosswalk on the southern approach of Cherry Lane. And those in the recommended design are upgraded to accommodate bicycles as well as pedestrians. There will be an active transportation multi-use pathway on the north side, as well as one on the north side to the west and on the south side to the east, and those have been adapted to link into what the county are proposing to do on County Road 33 and Bevel Line. So, recommendations, the next. There we go. We recommend to widen Seacliff Drive east to create exclusive left turn lanes in both directions at Cherry Lane and westbound at Cherry Lane and eastbound at Danforth. Signalize Seacliff Drive east at Cherry Lane with a pedestrian crossing on the west side only, and bicycle accommodations. Provide a center median between Cherry Lane and Danforth. The significance of that is, if you do in the future, and we don't see this in our horizon year, but it is possible in the future, that Danforth may need to be right in and right out. So the median allows that option in the future, should that ever be required. We would transition from a 3-lane cross-section to the west to this 4-lane cross-section and then back to 3 lanes. Oh, there we go. Thank you. And provide separate right and left turning lanes at all of the T intersections. In other words, at Cherry Lane, at Danforth, at Iroquois, and at Regatta. and then incorporate, and now you can see the plan, incorporate a multi-use pathway on the north side of Seacliff Drive, westerly from Cherry Lane to the Leamington Trail, and on both sides of Seacliff Drive, easterly from Cherry Lane to County Road 33, although there's still some work to do in the transitions of that. So that plan there is the basis that we are recommending going forward. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, John, appreciate it. And now, Alex, are there questions from council before we have the delegation speak? Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Madam Mayor. John, you, in the previous diagram, you showed what the driveway for the curling club was going to be, and it rounded in front. Is that the same idea? It doesn't depict in this yet?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We had discussions with the curling club, and we did send them two options. So one option was to come across the front of the property like you saw, and the second option was to wrap around the back of the building. I believe their preference is, if the driveway is closed, that we extend around to the back of the building and tie into their existing parking lot on the north side. And if that's the case, that that's the way they would choose to proceed, that's the way we would reconstruct the driveway.
Thank you very much.
Did I hear you say we would reconstruct the driveway?
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
I'm just wondering, how far down Cherry Lane does the new works go to?
Well, there is a transition of the main issue is transitioning the pathway, the active transportation pathway to the on-street traffic lane where it is a shared bicycle facility. So it would be just beyond, I guess, the limits of that. Is that about right?
Only reason I ask that right now because we have sidewalks on the west side, then you empty over onto the east side, then you empty back over to the west side if you want to walk the entire length of Cherry Lane. On a sidewalk, you crisscross back and forth twice. So that's the part that caught my eye there. I would hope that we would connect so it makes sense at that point to, if we're going to go to the trouble of doing this, we at least try and connect up with the existing infrastructure in some sort of a way so we don't have to crisscross so much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the sidewalk catalog, we'll call it, where we're missing sidewalks, where we're trying to put new sidewalks in. There's priorities set in place for that sidewalk money. Obviously, if council wishes to add that portion of sidewalk into the project, we could look at an estimate of putting that sidewalk in and come back to council with that cost that we would need to increase our budget to allow for us to construct that sidewalk. It's not an impossibility. It's just, it wasn't accounted for in our original estimates.
Thank you, Alex. I think that's, I'm not saying we have to do the entire shot like that, but just so that we have less crossover happening. If somebody wants to walk, that's a well-used road for exercise, for active transportation users. But yes, it doesn't make sense when people have to, you know, like that. It'd be nice to get them down there in one shot along one side of the road. That's all.
Can I ask you again, so what are you saying, just leave it on the south side as opposed to crisscrossing?
We've got works going on here, obviously, on the sidewalk, on the west side.
On the west side of what?
Cherry Lane.
Okay.
With this proposed works we're doing right now. But when you get down to, what's the first street there that you come to, Bruce? You need to cross over to the other side in order to use a sidewalk.
Okay.
Since we're going to the point of doing the work here at this point, we've got sidewalks over on the east side of the road now with this proposed works. Why wouldn't we take that down to meet the other sidewalk at least? I'm not saying we have to put in the active transportation portion past, that would be Shawnee at that point, is where you go back to the traditional sidewalk. But I would hope that that portion of the works on the east side of Cherry Lane there would go all the way down to Shawnee. And I couldn't tell from this picture how far down the works on the east side went.
I can ask you later, sorry. I'm just not seeing what you're seeing, that's fine. Anyone else? I have Mr. Rob Squire, I believe, that would like to speak. Rob, if you don't mind giving us your full name and your address. I'm not going to say 5 minutes.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Rob Squire, president of Sun Parlor Curling Club.
Your address.
I'm in Kingsville, 1067 Sycamore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors and staff. My name is Rob Squire. I'm the current president of the Sun Parlor Curling Club. We also have Dave Moncourt, past president, and Matt Dick, vice president, with us as well. And we also have some other members of our club in the audience tonight. We're here to voice our concerns with the proposed alterations to the existing entrance to our club and ask for you to defer the decision on this matter until we have had time to meet with the town and the consultant to iron out a plan that is acceptable to everyone. For the past 2 years, we have lived with a four-way stop at Cherry Lane, Seacliff Drive, and our access point. It appears to be working well. We have many concerns, and I'll do my best to keep it to 5 minutes. We were unaware of the existence of the R.C. Spencer Associate work and deliverables until one of our members was contacted by Mr. Del Bracco on July 18th and asked to meet on site to review the proposed plans. We feel we should have been consulted at the beginning of the project, but since we were not, we would like to take this opportunity to present our position. The report by R.C. Spencer, while well-written, has some shortcomings. The traffic study was done in the summer, at a time when there's little or no traffic entering or exiting our parking lot, except for the odd soccer mom and dad. This, in and of itself, is a flawed study in that it only consideration was for the traffic flow in the summer month, with no regards for the traffic pattern in the winter. We submit that the number is skewed based on the parameters of the study and should have included both summer and winter traffic patterns. The time frame of the study, even if done in the winter, would not have captured the bulk of the curling club traffic. Therefore, the methodology is flawed, so the outcomes on Table 1 are also flawed. Our present driveway and its orientation on Cherry Lane is almost a straight line. In no case can this intersection be less cumbersome to control than the corner of Talbot, Oak, Fraser, and Tim Hortons. The intersection is managed quite well. The preferred design in the 2012 EA was to leave our easterly access alone. The Spencer report on page 9 states that the present all-way stop is acceptable. They do state that the forecasted volume will render the all-way stop unsuitable in the future. Again, this is based on their flawed findings. The Spencer report dismissed this because of an unpaved dirt drive that is on the west side of our building, which they think, rather naively, will be acceptable to our members. We will discuss the drive later. There's no compelling reason given in the Spencer report as to why the easterly entrance is to be abandoned. One alternative proposal is to put a driveway across our front lawn. This is not possible because of the buried infrastructure in the area and the cost of relocating them. There is a mention in the Spencer report that there may be a need to purchase some of our existing frontage during the project. Once again, we'd like to be involved in that discussion. With respect to the proposed relocation of our entrance to the west side, there are many issues that with this proposal that we have. Some of them are, there's no direct access to our front door from this driveway. Remember, most of our members are seniors, coming and going generally in darkness, and it would be detrimental to the safety of our members if they have to use this driveway. The existing mud drive is considered impassable in the winter because of the chain link fence and berm on the ball diamond immediately to the west of the drive acts as a natural snow fence, which, as you know, deposits all the snow on the low pressure side. That means that our driveway gets inundated with snow. Paving will not alleviate this problem. There will be times, albeit rare, when even a paved driveway is going to be impassable, and our members will be unable to leave until the driveway is plowed out. Plowing that driveway is an exponential increase in cost that we, as a nonprofit corporation, should not have to entertain when we have a perfectly serviceable existing entrance at the east side of the building. Furthermore, the building was designed to function with an east side access. If you decide to proceed with the recommendations in the report, we must have the following, and keep in mind that we object to the proposals in the report. We require that the new driveway be wide enough for two vehicles and the pavement be feathered into our existing paved area. We would also submit that the drive is not put in at our request and that the municipality assumes the cost of plowing it as with the roadway. We would have to plow twice as much area. The proposal in front of us tonight only shows an apron on our west side. That is not acceptable. We would also request that our present parking area be repaved. As good corporate citizens of Leamington, we've allowed the residents of the Danforth to park on our property while their street was being redeveloped. This resulted in unnecessary damage to our parking lot. We have not, to date, quantified the damage, nor have we asked for repairs. But if you're going to close our east access, then it would be fitting that you repair the damages done while reconstructing Danforth. As a new double-wide driveway will be extremely inviting to the soccer and baseball parents and players, we feel the municipality should pave the property at the rear of our building so the damage to our property by the trespassers can be kept to a minimum. It is not our intent to be difficult. We feel strongly that our present access and always stop is working. We also feel that in the event that a traffic control signal is required, that our access point offers no greater challenge than that at Fraser, Talbot, Oak, and Tim Hortons. There's no tangible or perceivable benefit to the members of the Sun Parlor Curling Club by the proposed changes to the intersection of Cherry Lane and Seacliff Drive. There's only inconvenience to the members of the Curling Club in these proposals. We've enjoyed this access since 1959, and we feel that the reasons to change, as presented in the Spencer Report, can't justify any of the proposed changes. Therefore, we would submit that this item be deferred until all parties can meet and come up with a solution that is acceptable to the municipality and to the Sun Parlor Curling Club. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Questions? Councilor Wilkinson?
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Squire. I'm just wondering, what were the damages that were caused during the Danforth construction, if you don't mind sharing that with me?
Turn on your mic if you don't mind.
Sorry. The driveway is pretty well chewed up, not only from the Danforth, but from summer, we leave the roadway open for the public, and they come in and they park for the soccer behind us and the baseball beside us.
Councilor Thiessen?
Did I understand if we did go with the west side and the option with the driveway going in the front yard over to the east side, that would be at our cost? We would be putting that in for them? Is that my understanding?
Mr. Sharon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to address all of the concerns necessarily raised by Mr. Squire with regards to the traffic counts. I will just say a couple things. As Mr. Tuffmeyer pointed out, the offset nature of this particular entrance creates challenges. And essentially, for the long-term functionality of this intersection, and we're recommending that easterly entrance be closed and moved to the westerly entrance. Now, to the point about, well, what does that mean? You know, we have a gravel entrance now, and it needs repair. We have a perfectly good hard surface entrance. You know, it would be our intention, as we do on many infrastructure projects, where the growth of the community and the need for public infrastructure expansion, you know, does have a negative impact on private commercial properties or private landowners. You know, it is our full intention to work with the Curling Club and, at a bare minimum, make them whole. And we're not going to take them from a current hard surfaced entranceway and, you know, say, well, here's your entrance now, go use your gravel driveway. You know, it is our full intention to sit down, to understand the concerns, and to come to the table with some, you know, reasonable expectations that we can work through these things. If we're back in front of council and, you know, in the future, because we have not come up to, you know, an agreement, it won't be because we're being unreasonable. It is our plan to work with the club, to recognize the concerns, the history at this location, and to do our best to not negatively impact those members and hopefully leave them in a better position than when we started. But to consider leaving the entrance there causes many long-term functional challenges that we do not recommend leaving it there. And, you know, Alex talked about the potential to bring it out front. You know, that was an option. I think of the Nassif trucking property when we built the East Side Arterial Road and we needed, you know, greater setback from that particular road. We had to move that entrance, and we worked with that property owner, and that particular design alternative is what the owner preferred, and so that's what we went with as a municipality. In this particular case, we understand that's not what the Curling Club wants. We certainly wouldn't impose that. We would sit down and say, you know, well, what do you want and what is reasonable? The other side of the equation here is that we are also the stewards of the public purse. And again, we need to be able to justify what we're offering. Though the majority of the things that are mentioned here do not cause us concern, you know, with regards to paving that particular entrance, you know, some of the ongoing maintenance concerns. You know, I wouldn't want to get into a relationship where the municipality is working on private lands, but there are other ways in which to come to an agreement on these things. I mean, we're certainly not looking to have those discussions here in front of council. We're bringing this design alternative forward and saying this is the preferred, this is in the best interest of the municipality as a whole to build the intersection this way, recognizing that the Curling Club is negatively impacted, and it's our full intention to work with them and address those concerns. So I hope that shed some light on that.
Further, Councillor?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Rob, for those comments, and I'm sure that that you will work to make sure that everybody concerned can live with what and is happy with the outcome. And in thinking with the all-way stops that are there currently, and they are working good. They're working great currently, with one exception, and it's something that I've been watching for a few weeks now, and again saw it today. And it has to do with pedestrians and with cyclists trying to cross at that intersection. And when people pull up, they're each looking at the other two vehicles sitting there to see who's going to go, and they're not watching the pedestrians. And today again, there was a kid on a bicycle who didn't know when to go or when he could go, and finally everybody waved him across. And that's the reason we need that signalized intersection there. And I've had this discussion with some family members who last night told me, don't change it, it's good, it works, except in that case. And I'm going to shock a lot of people here because I haven't been a fan of some of the reports for roadways, but I do kind of like this one. To me, it makes sense. In the future, I would like to see the south side of Seacliff Drive East become an active trail. To join up. So again, we're not crisscrossing. People coming from the marina can make a right turn, head down and go up Cherry Lane, or head straight down Seacliff Drive East. And as Councillor Wilkinson said, we'd like to see those connected, those sidewalks from Seacliff Drive East going south as well. So I like this program or this project, and I have confidence that our administration can work with you and come up with a suitable solution for your driveway.
So if I may, Rob, you're not suggesting that we defer. You're saying that you will have these conversations with the curling club?
That's correct, Your Worship. You know, what we're looking for council is that we approve this as the basis for design. R.C. Spencer can continue with their detailed design on it. At the same time, we will sit down with the curling club, understand their demands, hopefully come to a resolution. What I can commit is that despite moving forward, because this is the first step in a multi-step rebuild of Seacliff Drive all the way to Bevel Line, you know, we don't want to delay this project, but I will commit that if we are unable to come to a resolution, we will come back in front of council. We will disclose to council the terms, you know, where we're at in the negotiation, and you know, then ultimately council can provide us direction. You know, again, I can assure you that we will be very reasonable in that balance with the curling club, basically saying that we're looking for council's approval, but we're also going to work with the curling club. And if we cannot come to a resolution, we'll be back in front of council. So we've gone to detailed design, we're ready to tender, but before we do these things, there's still these outstanding issues and get direction from council.
Okay, that sounds good to me as well. Council, I'm seeing nods, yes. Did you have a comment, Councillor Hammond?
Yes, I did, Mayor, thank you. Not pertaining necessarily to the relationship between the curling club and the town. It sounds like that's going to get worked out, hopefully to your satisfaction, Mr. Squire, and the rest of the members of the curling club. Along with what Councillor Thiessen had just said, and like his family members, I've had a lot of people, you know, that have asked the question, and you brought up a good point with respect to pedestrians trying to cross that intersection. But what has taken us from no traffic signals and no stops 2 years ago, and when, you know, the four-way, or if you want to call them three-way stops that were put in, you know, because of the excess traffic that was coming as a result of the work on Erie Street North. So here we are now talking traffic signals. And I see this, and I believe this, and especially in light of what, as I said, Councillor Thiessen mentioned about pedestrians. But I think that there's a lot of public out there that's asking that same question. What is taking us from nothing to traffic signals in less than 2 years?
Mr. Sharon, did you want to reply to that?
Sorry, Your Worship. Councillor Hammond, this EA was initiated almost 20 years ago. So the municipality identified growth lands basically to be in the southeast quadrant of the municipality. The EA was initiated, it was put on hold while the East Side Arterial Road was constructed, and then it was brought back to the table in and around 2010, 2011, completed and presented to council. This is the environmental assessment of Seacliff Drive, and basically from this intersection all the way to the East Side Arterial Road. It was brought back to council in 2013 and approved by council as the basis for design at that time. And the traffic signal was there. So we recognize that this is the way we're growing. Traffic volumes are growing as all the subdivisions that are being developed out there are built, as you know, the development we've seen already on the south side of Seacliff Drive near this intersection have happened. Traffic volumes are increasing. When we do, this is an arterial road, the most important southern arterial road in the community. So we recognize we need to be prepared to deal with those traffic volume increases. As it sits right now from a construction horizon, because we're starting here and working our way east, this is basically the first phase. Right now in our 5-year capital plan, we're able to get as far as Regatta. And then we're going to continue to try and work into the budget, you know, the likely sequence, whether it's Regatta all the way to Bevel Line, or whether we have to put some phasing in there as well. We'll have to figure that out. But this is by far a nothing to signals in 2 years. You know, we've been looking at this thing, well, frankly, for a couple decades and preparing for this, and it has been planned this way. And, you know, these are forward-looking initiatives. You know, if we don't do this particular phase first, the order of operations fails. This is the way we need to rebuild this, such that when all of those traffic volumes that are coming, and we're seeing the development, when they're there, we have the roads to deal with it. Because the last thing you want to do is start understanding why traffic isn't moving in your community, because you haven't prepared for the increased volumes that we're seeing.
Your worship, thank you. And Rob, that's what I wanted to put out there, because that explanation needs to be given, because people don't understand how far back this has been on the books for this long a period of time. So thank you for that.
Great, so if there are no other questions or comments, the recommendation is, I don't like to just say move it until I go back and look at it, if you don't mind. So 2 parts. We receive and approve, and that based on the results of the study, the impact study, the traffic impact study, that the recommended design plan alternative 1 be approved for final engineering, and we know we've already received word from Edmen that they will meet with the curling club to discuss hopefully an agreement that works for all parties. So with that, moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Hammond, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Squire. Thank you, gentlemen, as well. Moving on to the Graduated Risk Floodplain Mapping Project Award. Is that, oh, sorry, Alan. You were at the back of the room a minute ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to gain approval to award a project to Zuzik Inc. For the completion of a graduated risk floodplain mapping project. Southeast Leamington shoreline and interior agriculture lands located south of Wheatley Harbor to the east and south of the Sturgeon Creek Basin to the west and north of Point Pelee National Park has a long history of coastal erosion and flooding, and that's shown in figures 1 and 2 in the report. Just to show the study area. Approximately 7 flooding events occurred over the last 12 months, the worst of which happened in April of 2018. Several homes along Marintet Beach were severely damaged, along with severe erosion and flooding damage along the entire eastern and western shorelines. The current floodplain mapping that we used was developed in 1976. The extent of the flood risks is unknown due to the outdated mapping and rapidly eroding shoreline and near shore lake bed. Updating the current mapping is a high priority for the municipality, and since 1976, provincial technical guidance on floodplain mapping has been updated, and modeling and mapping resources and techniques have evolved. Coastal and interior floodplain mapping is necessary to support flood and erosion-related response to emergency situations and mitigation planning. Mapping is also necessary to support decisions related to land use planning and permitting, particularly in at-risk areas. Generally, it's expected that the new maps will be used to mitigate and reduce impacts of flooding in the study area. The municipality received confirmation from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that Public Safety Canada approved the subject project for partial funding under the Federal National Disaster Mitigation Program. The project, however, must be completed by March 31st, 2020. The project is expected to develop coastal floodplain mapping to current mapping and technical standards and produce new flood hazard mapping along the shoreline of Leamington. The municipality will be enabled to identify and support flood mitigation and future capital works planning initiatives for the Leamington shoreline. And I've listed in the report some of the goals and objectives of the project, calculating updated shoreline erosion and downcutting rates, nearshore wave modeling and wave uprush and overtopping, evaluating existing ice hazard and potential climate change impacts, integrate hazard setbacks, evaluate emergency ingress and egress for high-risk areas, identifying at-risk structures, and preparing preliminary cost estimates for mitigation projects. The municipality recognizes the impact of flooding has had on the residents within the study area, therefore community, and that we saw that tonight in our previous council reports. Therefore, community engagement throughout the course of the study is important. A minimum of 2 informal public information centers will be held to share technical summaries, handouts, and display material. The interaction between residents, council, and the study team and the Conservation Authority is critical to the success of this project. On December 7, 2015, Council directed administration to examine short and long-term strategies to amend the existing land uses in Southeast Leamington. And this study will be pivotal in determining and confirming the sustainable land uses for Southeast Leamington. The municipality received 3 submissions in response to a request for proposals. The request for proposal was advertised on our bids and tenders website. 3 members of administration then evaluated the submissions independently and came to a unanimous decision that Zuzik Inc. provided the proposal that is most advantageous to the municipality. Zuzik proposes to complete the project for just over $218,000. We anticipate the expenditure of approximately $5,000 in advertising, mailing, coordination for venues, and other details associated with running the public information centers. Our 2019 approved municipal budget for the assignment was set at $200,000 with $100,000 in federal funding and $100,000 net from revenue. However, the federal NDP grant application was based on 50% of the project cost that were estimated at $215,000. So you can see in the table that of our estimated cost of just over $223,000, $107,500 would be recovered from the NDMP funding program, and $100,000 was budgeted from our net from revenue, and we have a variance of $16,223. The variance is proposed to be funded from the 2020 budget, as the project will span 2 fiscal years and much of the project scope will be completed in 2020. So we are looking for council's approval to award this project.
Thank you, Alan. Comments or questions from council? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks, Alan. Moving on to the purchase of the 2-way radio and the GPS tracking systems. Mr. Del Ciencio.
Thank you, Mayor Mayor McDonald. Yes. Thanks. Members of council, we're bringing this report forward tonight for the approval on the purchase of these radios and the GPS tracking systems. So we put a team together and worked to look at the requirements for the fire department, as well as interoperability between the other existing radio systems that we have for public works and water. We looked at that, and then we wanted to also ensure that with the transition in dispatching services to Windsor coming in 2020, that the system would be compatible for that as well. So we took all that into account to define the specifications when we went to look at this system. Last year we did an RFP. We specifically excluded the fire department from that RFP, knowing that we were going to transition dispatching this year, and we wanted to coincide it then. But when we did that RFP, we allowed for flexibility, knowing that when we brought this forward this year, we would ensure that the system that we got last year would also accommodate fire's requirements. So last year, the successful proponent was Sky Mobile in their solution that they provided for the other departments, Public Works, Water, and the Rec Department. So what we were doing is taking the pricing that they established then in terms of the system and the functionality and integrate it into how we manage the fire radios now. Slightly different than what we do with Public Works and whatnot. We lease and utilize a system owned by Sky Mobile, With the fire department, we own the rights to use the frequencies, so we purchase the infrastructure, and then we purchase the radios to communicate on that infrastructure. So it's a capital cost this year as opposed to an operating cost, essentially, which was last year. With this and the timeliness of bringing this forward is the dispatching agreement with Windsor allotted money that Windsor would put into their systems to integrate with whatever radio system we have at the time of the agreement starting, which is January 1st. So if we make the change now, Windsor would be on the hook to integrate into our current system. Should we maintain what we have now and change at a later date, we would incur the additional costs for Windsor to accommodate any radio system that we have, or that we would change to at that point in time. We've spoken to Windsor, and no matter which way we go, they can accommodate either our existing or the proposed solution that we're recommending today. So any monies that they'll put in will accommodate. So should we choose not to do this tonight, we would incur not only these costs at a later date, plus the cost for Windsor to transition to accommodate for proper dispatching. This solution also will increase the functionality of what their current system has now. The current system in fire is approximately, the infrastructure back end is approximately 10 plus years old, and some of the handhelds range from 5 to 15 years old. So it's timely to look at this. We're changing the technology that they have, so not only are we upgrading the hardware, we're also changing it to provide more functionality, and we're increasing the GPS system, which they don't currently have. So with that, and as well as obtaining some credits in returning some of the old equipment that we have currently, it makes a capital cost of, or a one-time capital cost of just shy of $96,000, and then the ongoing monthly costs detailed of $76 per month on the radio side, and GPS $300 a month. So we did not have this approved in the 2019 operating budget, but going forward, starting next year, we will realize a savings of just under $75,000 a year in dispatching. So essentially, we're just shy of a year and a half for an ROI on this kind of a system. So the recommendation is that we authorize the purchase of this two-way radio and GPS tracking systems to Sky Mobile, and that we be authorized to dispose of some of the existing equipment to obtain trading credits.
Thank you, Dave. Sounds good to me. Council. Councilor Thiessen.
The GPS tracking, you've got 12 units there now. Are you looking in the future to go to more, or which units are you looking at tracking currently? And where do you see the benefit in that?
So those units will go in the whole fleet of vehicles, including the command vehicles and the actual fire trucks. They will be utilized for different functions. In the command vehicles, they'll be utilized the same function that we use in public works. You know, you can track not only locations, you can track faults in there, you can track how fast a vehicle is going and whatnot. So you have that functionality built in. In terms of what we're going to use it for in the fire trucks is more compliancy issues to produce reports on time it left the fire hall to time it arrived on scene. I do know, and I believe the chief can speak more to this, but there's certain implications if you do not, get there in a certain amount of time and whatnot. So with this functionality, this will provide reporting to the second as to where it is. So in case there's questions or anything comes up, insurance related or legal questions to it, we will have reports to produce to say machine from here, fire truck from here to on scene was exactly X number of minutes.
Anyone else? Councillor Hammond.
Worship, thank you. I have a question pertaining to two-way radios. However, it's outside of the report, but I just wanted to get an opportunity to ask Dave a question once this report has been dealt with, if that's all right. So having said that, I'll move this report.
Moved by Councillor Hammond, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And that's carried. Can he ask a question related to this report? Yeah. Except that Dave can stay that long. We'll have to leave your question till open session. And if Mr. Del Ciencio wants to leave, we'll get the answer back to you. Is that all right? Well, it has to be all right. We have to follow the
That's
protocol, the
fine. It
procedure.
has to do with two-way radios in another department, but that's fine, yep.
So, Mr. D, you don't have to stay. We can get the answer from you at another point in time, but we'll take note of the question.
Mr. D knows what the question is.
With that, I'm moving on to the next item. Thanks, Dave. Moving on to the Leamington Pollution Control Center blower upgrades. Ms. Shannon.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. This report that I bring to you tonight recommends that council authorize administration to retain AECOM to provide engineering services for the proposed blower upgrade project. Currently, the Leamington Pollution Control Plant uses 5 centrifugal blowers to supply air to the aeration tanks. The aeration process is one of the most important steps in the treatment plant. The supplied air is used to provide oxygen to the microorganisms to break down the organic matter in the wastewater prior to final settling. The existing blowers were installed with the plant upgrades and have been operational since 2011. There are 3 different items that led to the development of this proposed project. The first one is the way the current blowers operate. The current configuration results in gaps in the air delivery to the aeration system. The blowers cannot be throttled down to reduce power supply during low air demands. This ultimately results in over-aeration and the inability to operate the system efficiently. The second item is the blower failure that we experienced in 2016. During the repair, it was found that the arrangement for the vanes differed from the shop drawings in the design. There were multiple discussions with the supplier related to the design requirements, but they insisted that the arrangement would not impact performance. The repair took much longer than expected, and since the blower has been back in service, we have continued to experience increased maintenance on the unit. In addition, a second blower has since failed in 2018, but has not been sent for repair to date. The third and final item is the energy study that was completed in 2016. One of the main recommendations of that plant was to look at an upgrade to the blower system, as it was identified as one of the key areas of inefficiency. As a result of all of these items, the plant retained Jacobs, formerly CH2M Hill, who did the plant upgrade project in 2009. They completed a blower evaluation study for us that looked at the system performance as well as potential blower replacement. 6 alternatives were reviewed, which included repairing the existing blowers, retrofitting the existing blowers with variable frequency drives, and different alternatives to replace the centrifugal units with the new high-speed turbo blowers. High-speed turbo blowers are relatively new in the wastewater industry and weren't considered a viable technology when the plant upgrades were completed. They can achieve higher mechanical and electrical efficiencies and can operate to match required airflow demands. The recommendation from the Jacobs study was a hybrid solution in which 1 existing centrifugal blower is maintained and 2 new turbo blowers are installed. This alternative allows the plant to implement an energy-efficient technology that has the ability to throttle our airflow rate based on the plant requirements. The next steps in the project would be to proceed with a pre-selection request for proposal for the turbo blowers, followed by detailed design, tender, and construction. Administration requested proposals from 3 engineering firms that had previously performed work at the plant to assist with these tasks. A detailed review of the proposals was completed, and all proposals received were compliant with the scope of work. Administration therefore recommends awarding the project to AECOM. The blower upgrades project is approved in the PCC capital budget under energy upgrades. The overall project budget for 2019 was $450,000. Already allocated to this budget for 2019, as you'll see in the table in the report, was a couple of final invoices for carryover projects from last year, the Jacob Study invoice, as well as LED lighting upgrades at the plant. If this project is approved, the AECOM costs, as well as shop drawing review costs, will be drawn from the 2019 budget, leaving approximately $271,000 in the 2019 budget. The estimated capital cost for the equipment and construction is $1 million. This would require a proposed 2020 budget of about $730,000. 2019 spending is dependent on project timing and the pre-selection process. Once the pre-selection is complete, administration will report back to council with the results, shop drawing costs, and updated capital budget based on the selected blower manufacturer. Administration also expects this project to be eligible for an energy rebate through the independent electricity system operator. This again would reduce the overall impact to the capital budget. The rebate is currently estimated at $137,000. In addition to that savings, the consulting engineer has also estimated an annual electricity savings of approximately $140,000. In closing, it is recommended that the services of AECOM for blower upgrades at the Leamington Pollution Control Center be retained in the amount of $79,970 plus applicable taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Comments or questions? Motion? Councillor Thiessen. Oh, moved by Councillor Thiessen, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Didn't see it. Moving on to the report for a request for a bylaw to regulate the keeping of pigeons. Is that you, Ms.
Yes, it
Orton?
is.
Thank you.
Over the past 2 years, the municipality has received 6 complaints regarding the keeping of pigeons. The nature of the complaints include pigeons entering onto neighboring properties and defecating in the yard, pigeons entering onto neighboring properties and scaring children, dead pigeons found on properties neighboring a property where pigeons are kept, and then just general inquiries regarding the keeping of pigeons in residential areas. The municipality's zoning bylaw regulates the keeping of livestock, including poultry, but it has been the opinion of administration that these definitions do not include pigeons or many other birds. Therefore, there's no bylaw that prohibits the activity in urban areas, which is the area of the municipality where the complaints arise. Most recently, a complainant has asked that the municipality consider passing a bylaw prohibiting or regulating the keeping of pigeons. Various municipalities throughout the province have enacted such bylaws. Restrictions include the zone in which pigeons may be kept, how many pigeons are permitted, the type of enclosure, the hours the pigeons are permitted to be outside their enclosure, and where they may roam. Generally, the bylaws restrict the keeping of pigeons to those persons who breed them for sport or show. If council wishes to consider a bylaw regulating the keeping of pigeons, consideration may also be given to expand the regulation to the keeping of all birds, which are not deemed to be livestock or poultry. There would be no financial impact at this time regarding this bylaw other than the resources to devote to its drafting. So I've presented 2 options for council to either provide direction to administration to bring forward a bylaw to restrict the keeping of pigeons and other birds to those persons who breed them for sport or show, and include regulations on the keeping of them in order to mitigate nuisances, or council decline to provide that direction to administration.
Thank you, Ruth. Mr. Martin, you're here to speak. to this? If you don't mind giving us your full name and your address as well.
My name is Bob Martin. My address is 9 Longfield.
Thank
I
you.
just have a short commentary.
Sure.
Much less than 5 minutes.
Thank you.
I've requested a pigeon bylaw because of what I've personally experienced within the last year or so. My wife and I retired here 8 years ago now. The house behind us is a rental property, and the new tenant decided to raise pigeons after being told to get rid of his chickens. Pigeons are a dirty, filthy bird that can cause damage and pose a health hazard, according to Health Canada. Dead pigeons have been found in an adjacent yard. What caused their death? I don't know. But I happen to have a lung condition, which makes me reluctant to use my backyard. And as a property owner, that is just not right. In addition to being a health hazard, pigeon droppings create an unnecessary mess, are acidic, and can cause damage to metal and stonework, never mind wood and shingles. On numerous occasions, we have had to wash our wooden privacy fence and our garden shed. I understand that pigeons and their droppings were a problem in Leamington's core a few years back and had to be eradicated. Why should this be any different now? Pigeons are of no social value whatsoever. Some jurisdictions, such as the Fraser Valley Regional District, have classified them as poultry and treated as such. Other jurisdictions have either banned pigeons outright, or for those who are raising them for show or to race, have placed severe restrictions on how they are to be contained and maintained, as indicated in the City of Cornwall bylaw and the comments section of Ms. Orton's report. To summarize, pigeons and their filthy droppings add zero value to our community. In my opinion, a pigeon bylaw is the solution to this problem. Thank you very much for tabling this report. I'm hopeful that common sense will prevail.
Great, thank you, Mr. Martin. Comments from council, discussion. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm glad it's come to this point here where we can consider it. Since I was originally, this matter was brought to me here by Bob here. Since then, I've heard of other homes. In fact, my daughter attended a birthday party of a person here in town where, yes, there is raisings of pigeons going on, and sure enough, the mess that surrounds the home, I sure as heck would not want to live beside it. It would drive me bonkers, that's for sure. I can't imagine living beside it. If this is something that's going to continue to happen, I don't see the harm in this. In fact, I think it would be something that's warranted. So that's my only comments. I've seen it firsthand, what he's dealing with at his house, and yes, it is, I'm sure, very frustrating to deal with. Plus the health implication that he's mentioned as well. I think there is legitimate proof behind that is correct. So that's my comments.
I have Councillor Dunn next.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I agree that, well, with dogs, we've had to, if you're going to raise dogs, you have to have kennels outside on farmland. I think that's the same thing with pigeons or any other birds. If you're going to have a large quantity of them, you need to, at a certain point, we need to move them out. They should be on farmland. That's where the need, not in rural areas because of the mess and stuff that they would cause. And just because of the number of people around and with livestock, isn't there standards for that? And the amount of waste that they produce. So I am in agreement with this and will support.
Well, I was going to say too, I'll support it as well. I have entertained complaints. I think it's becoming something that people are doing now. It was not a problem at one time. However, I was on the BIA and in the Uptown Core when we dealt with that problem. And it cost the BIA a fair bit of money. And then it ended up private businesses had to put those spikes on their roofs to keep them at bay. I remember them. Sometimes they were shot and would die later and fall down onto the sidewalk as people walked by. We had issues back in the 90s of pigeons, and it's obviously now becoming something in the urban areas. So yes, I agree. I think too we need to do something towards it. Anyway, so Councillor Hammond.
Your Worship, thank you. Yeah, just to your point, and I agree wholeheartedly. It's kind of ironic it comes up, and you mentioned the BIA. We're currently pricing pigeon spikes right now for the Bank Theater, and it's going to be upwards to $1,000 to put them on the roof to try to prevent this from happening. So I wholeheartedly agree something needs to be done.
Okay, great. So then moved option 1 by Councillor Thiessen, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We look forward to that. Moving on to now the amendment to the delegation of authority bylaw and policy. Ruth,
He just looked at me and laughed. I don't know why.
I did?
No, Bill.
Oh. Oh, probably because he's shoveling the pigeon job on you.
This is an easy one.
Okay, thanks so much.
So sections 9, 10, and 11 of the Municipal Act authorize a municipality to delegate its powers and duties under the Act or any other act to a person or body subject to certain restrictions. The powers referred to are divided between administrative powers, which include all matters required for the management of a municipality, and legislative powers, which include matters where council acts in a legislative or quasi-judicial function. In 2016, Council passed Bylaw 8516, being a bylaw to delegate powers and duties. Council also passed a delegation of powers and duties policy, and that policy provides guidance to Council to determine whether it is appropriate to delegate powers or duties to another body or an individual. The matters before you this evening include the delegation of administrative powers. So, with reference to the policy, Council should consider whether the delegation will provide efficient management of municipal operations and respond to matters in a timely fashion, and if there is appropriate accountability assigned to each delegation. In consideration of the requirements of the Act and the principles found within the policy, the delegation of powers and duties bylaw also provides that all powers and duties delegated by Council also remain with Council. Any delegation of power or duty may be revoked by Council at any time without notice. A delegation of a power or duty under the bylaw to an individual as an officer or employee is also a delegation to an individual who is in that capacity on a permanent, temporary, or acting basis. A delegation under the bylaw to an individual who is an employee is also a delegation to the CIO. A delegation to the clerk is also a delegation to the deputy clerk, and a delegation to the treasurer is also a delegation to the deputy treasurer. Since the passing of the delegation of powers and duties bylaw in 2016, administration continues to find further opportunities to create efficiencies, ensure accountability, and approve processes through appropriate delegations. This bylaw was amended in 2017, and further delegations are recommended in this report. Those are highlighted within Schedule A. And the first is simply an amendment that's at the top of the page 4, which is the delegation, which was the execution of the demand for payment under a letter of credit. That's simply amending those persons to whom that power has been delegated to the clerk or the treasurer, which is consistent with our template letter of credit that we send out to developers for their reference when we're asking for securities to be provided. So that's simply an amendment. The second is on page 6, and that's the addition of a matter being to authorize and execute non-disclosure or confidentiality agreements. Those would be requested by a third party for the purpose of protecting that third party information that if it were released could prejudice the competitive position of that third party, could interfere with their contractual negotiations or relationships with others. If that confidential information were disclosed, it could result in a situation where similar information would not be provided to the municipality. It could potentially result in undue loss or gain to another institution or person or group, or it could reveal information that was supplied during labor negotiations. The bylaw, draft bylaw indicates that the person or persons to whom would have that authority to execute and authorize such an agreement would be the director of a department who is responsible for the project or the process, together with the mayor. The condition to be included in the agreement is that it is not applicable in the case of a situation where the municipality is obligated to release that information pursuant to a court order or by way of a regulation or an order. And I provided the example, the order of the Information and Privacy Commissioner. The next amendment to the schedule is the delegation to the chief building official to authorize and execute conditional permit agreements. So conditional permits are authorized by the chief building official, but the building code requires that any time a conditional permit is issued, that the applicant enter into an agreement with the municipality. So those agreements have been brought forward to council on a number of occasions. The problem that we always encounter is that the reason for the conditional permit is because to wait until the permit application is completed and finalized and all of the applicable laws complied with is creating a delay. So it just makes sense to provide the authority to the chief building official to also authorize and execute those conditional permit agreements. And there's a number of items that are required to be in those agreements, and those items are included in the building code. So there's no direct financial impact by virtue of passing this amendment to the delegation of powers and duties bylaw, but there is somewhat of a decrease in administrative time spent preparing reports to council and seeking the authorization to enter into those agreements. So the recommendation is that council pass this bylaw 4319 being a bylaw to amend the delegation of powers and duties bylaw.
Thank you, Ruth. Are there questions? No, everyone's fine with that? Moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ruth. Moving on to other matters for approval, we'll start with the minutes of the Leamington Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, and that meeting was held on May 22nd. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. And then there's the second Leamington Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, and that was held on June 9th. 19th. Oh, it should be the 19th, sorry. Yes, I did get that note. So that was June 19th, moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. And then there are the minutes of the Special Police Services Board meeting, and that was held on May 30th. Moved by Councillor Hammond, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And that's carried. And then finally, the minutes of the Police Services Board meeting held on June 5th. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. There is no report on closed sessions. We move on to consideration of bylaws.
Bylaw 43-19, a bylaw to amend the delegation of powers and duties, bylaw 8516 as amended, and bylaw 4419, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Leamington at its meeting held August 13th, 2019.
Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? And that's carried. There are no notices of motion, so we'll move on to open session. That's you.
Your Worship, thank you.
Councillor Hammond.
The question I wanted to raise earlier was, because we're talking about two-way radios right now, I'm wondering if it isn't time for us to start supplying our bylaw enforcement officers with two-way radios. We're asking more of them now to go into certain areas that maybe they could use a little bit of, and I'll call it backup. I did mention, as I indicated earlier today, Dave is going to, with your permission, take a look at it to see whether or not it's feasible. But I think it's time we offer those three gentlemen that security of having a two-way radio.
Made note by the CAO. Anyone else? Councillor Wilkinson.
Something for consideration. I had a young man approach me on the weekend with what I thought was a pretty decent suggestion. When I say young, 10 years old, a resident of Leamington. He attended the Mill Street markets here on the weekend, and what he noticed a lot of as he was having his snacks with his family was the amount of smoking and vaping going on that street. He asked me if we would consider having, whether it be a smoking section or a special spot for smokers or vapors to use. I didn't know what I know we have our signs throughout the municipality, different areas where you're not allowed to smoke. There is one around the corner, I know, where the Village Inn used to be. I'm just wondering if it's something that we can consider. I don't know if we invite the health unit to maybe come into town those nights, the way that the alcohol guys come to town, to make sure that everything's right. But I thought it was a decent suggestion. I worked that the Talbot or Erie entrance that night, and I did notice a pile of people walking in with cigarettes into the festival area. Something for consideration. I thought it was a pretty good comment that he brought to me, and hoping that we can consider it for him.
So a note made as well to look into that. Further to that, we allow smoking in Seacliff Park, right? It just has to be at a distance from the splash pad, because I find that a tad, not unusual, but when we have our concerts, because we are in such close proximity to each other, the smoking, when you're not used to it, I have asthma, I notice it right away. And it is bothersome, I'll put it that way, rather than a stronger word. Could you speak to that, Ruth?
We will be bringing forward a smoking bylaw to council for consideration, and some of the options will be to have bylaws that incorporate the whole of our municipal parks. Just to the point of the Mill Street Market, we'll certainly look into that. There is a provision within the Municipal Act that indicates that a municipality doesn't have the authority to prohibit smoking on a highway. So that would include any of our roads. We just need to look at that in connection with the Mill Street Market when we actually temporarily close the road, and the fact that there are patios which might fall within the definition under the provincial legislation that would require the prohibition of smoking. So we'll certainly look at that as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Yes, if I may speak again, Your Worship. I thought my fellow councillors were going to talk more about some of the last weekends of events, but in light of what this past weekend was with respect to the Lebanese Club, and the weekend prior to that, and I'm sure they're going to have a lot of comments about the Hawks for Hospice and about the rodeo, it came to mind, and I'm going to ask my fellow councillors to put their minds to this. We're blessed in Leamington to have hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers. And it would be nice, none of these things that can happen without the volunteers, as we know. And I would like to see us put our mind to having a volunteer day in Leamington. So when I say to my fellow councillors, I'm asking you, what can that look like? What can we do to recognize our not our councillors, but our volunteers, at least one day out of the year in Leamington or our municipality? And I think we should do that. We've had something in the past, but it's always been kind of the same people who are recognized through a banquet, and I understand because of the numbers, it's difficult to try to do anything special for them, but maybe if we put our minds to it, we can come up with something. So I'll ask for your support or help on that. Aaron Guy?
We can even have a chat about that. We let that go a couple of years ago because it was always the same people. Same people were nominated by the same organizations that had basically the same volunteers. If we did something, I think it would be up to us to pound the pavement and get out there and talk to those organizations and have them give us a list of their volunteers. I think that, I don't see there is any harm in that. We had also had a bit of a conversation about even having mayor's awards at some point in time. So maybe we can sit down and have some conversation about that, maybe tying the two together and seeing what we can do. And maybe it's about all of council recognizing, maybe it's even a council awards night, doesn't have to be just the mayor's, but I think it might be time for us to change what we did because it was getting tired. And like I said, we never saw new people. We were pounding. Jennifer Bavetta was the person that worked on that with the deputy mayor, and it was just always like pulling teeth, wringing necks, if you will, and it just was tedious. So I think it's time. I think you're right, and maybe we can sit down and have a conversation. Mr. Neufeld.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially in light of the fact that, 4 or 5 years ago, we started down a path of trying to reinvent not just the Uptown, but Leamington. And one of the things we talked about often was how can we engage the public, because once the public gets engaged, there's a snowball effect. More and more people want to get involved. This is exactly what I've seen happen in Leamington over the last 3 or 4 years. We can point to Hogs for Hospice, and we know that the gentleman that led the way on that, but there are hundreds of volunteers in that evening. And what I'm seeing now is more and more volunteers coming forward with ideas, taking the initiative to make new things happen. So a refresh of what we used to do, I think, is in order, especially as our community starts coming forward and with the initiatives and support and pride of our community.
I think that's right. I think times have changed. People are starting to buy into the reinvention, if we want to call it that. And what I like to see, too, with these organizations like the Roma Club and the Lebanese Club, they're starting to put their arms out and embrace our community rather than just being insular and having just their own people, if you will, be part of their events. They're now reaching out and making it be more inclusive of others. And I think for us, it's a quality of life thing because now we get to learn about other cultures and they're our neighbors. We get to enjoy their food and their dancing and their music, and it's turned out to be a wonderful opportunity. But it's also allowed those clubs to start growing, where a few years ago, a lot of them were on their last legs and some just kind of died away. But those two clubs, and well, actually the Portuguese club as well, have recognized the fact that they need to embrace the rest of the community to keep going. So that's wonderful. And then as you talked about the reinvention, the library was fantastic. The supervisor asked me to pass on to the rest of council and administration. They were so busy on Monday. The video room and the recording studio were packed till closing. So Sue asked me to please pass it on. They're more than thrilled. I did a story time today, and it was wonderful. I had 3 of my story time people when I used to work at Ruthven Library. The moms were there with their kids, so it was another generation. And the really cool part is I did it with my daughter, so that was even cooler. It was wonderful to see all the people out and using the library. That's what we wanted, and it took off right out of the starting gate. And of course, Hogs for Hospice was fantastic. The continuum of musical events every night of the weekend and into the week is also fantastic. And then the announcement yesterday was a culmination of a lot of years of lobbying. Whether we're there yet or not remains to be seen. I'm not going to be a naysayer. I'm taking things at face value. I think we're a step ahead of where we were before. I do believe the rest of the county needs to get onto the fact that it does you better if you are on the side of the party in power. You can't just keep electing the same party and they're never in power. It has helped us. It has helped us in our community. Whether or not you're a card carrying anything, I think it has really been an advantage because we have had the ear, particularly in this riding and in this community, we have had the ear of this government. So I think it has paid off. So we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic that it'll happen, and we look forward to that. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Thiessen, Councillor Dunn, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.